my name is Danny Lands. I'm out here at Wookies in the Woods from California, and this is my all-wheel drive swapped Corrado VR6 Turbo. 2,300 miles from Orange County to here, so it was a long haul. We did it straight through. It took about 35 hours. After I finally got this car done, I just felt like this was the ultimate place to take it. So Corrado's always been my favorite VW. I mean, that's always been my favorite car. I got this one about 8 years ago, and about 3-4 years ago, I decided I was really gonna get into trying to learn how to build the car and fix it up. And at the time I had a Mark 7 Golf R, and the all-wheel drive was just really amazing in that car. It made it what it was, of course. And so when I started thinking about putting more power in this car, I started thinking about a limited slip diff, and then I thought, well, no, the ultimate way to go would be to make it all-wheel drive like my Golf R, which sounded pretty crazy at the time. I had people convince me that it was pretty straightforward, but it really wasn't, and it was a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. But it works, and it does put the power down incredibly well. There's zero torque steer, and it's a really cool and unique car. Corrado's already kind of a unique car, but now mine's a little extra unique. So. Yeah, so once I decided that I wanted to try and do this, I just kind of scoured the internet hoping for someone who was actually parting out these parts rather than, I definitely didn't want to try and scavenge out of an R32 because they're kind of sacred. So yeah. I just found a guy that had the Gen 1 Haldex out of a Mark 4 R32 with the rear suspension, which is what I wanted because it had the rear brakes and everything. And he had the O2M transmission and the shift box as well. So I bought those complete from Florida and had them crated and shipped to California. So from there, it was kind of the first step in my mind was, let me figure out how to fit this rear end into the Corrado. And so I cut a giant hole in the trunk floor and started trying to position the Haldex up in there and figure out, where I could position it and get it to fit. Oh, I actually fabricated my own brackets that mount to the Mark IV trailing arms and then use the Corrado vertical coilovers. So it's kind of a mix of Corrado and Mark IV rear suspension. So it is a Mark IV R32 drive shaft, but it was shortened about 60 millimeters and then rebalanced. Take it to a drive shaft shop and have it redone. And then the other tricky part was where the drive shaft sits in the tunnel in the Corrado. I had to place it pretty high. And so the shift box, and the clearance for the prop shaft was really, really tight. And so there was probably 20 hours of work just into fitting the shifter in the stock location and still having it clear the prop shaft. So little stuff like that takes forever. I think I have about 1,500 hours of work into the car. That's
1,500?
That's my best guess, yeah. It was a lot of work. Busy person just like everybody else, so it was some long nights here and there, and the occasional Saturday going from like 10 to 10, just, burning a 12-hour day to try and make some progress. Probably one of the biggest hurdles initially was getting the transmission to fit properly and making sure that the angle drive lined up with the tunnel and everything, which should have technically been straightforward, but it just didn't turn out to be. One of the biggest learning experiences was just building the whole turbo system. Again, VR6 turbos are not unique. There's plenty of them out there. Not building it from a kit, just building it from the parts and kind of figuring out how I wanted to fit everything. Again, fitting stuff was always the hardest challenge. So because it's a water to air intercooler, I have a radiator for the intercooler that's almost as big as the Mark III radiator that's for the engine. So just packaging everything in there was tricky. Having issues with the standalone and just getting it to run right and finding the right tuner and all that kind of stuff. It just required a lot of patience. I blew a big old hole in my fifth cylinder piston running lean on the first trying to log a pull. So when stuff like that happens, you're just back to the drawing board to try and get it to work. ATP manifold and a Precision Turbo 5976, very small turbo, pretty small turbo. It is a T4 housing, but I wanted to have a quick spool and have torque because it's got the all-wheel drive and I'm not going to be fighting the torque steer, so I wanted it to spool quickly and have a good power band. And then it's got 630 injectors, AEM 400 pump. It's running a fuel cell in the trunk, so we've got plenty of fuel right now. We're running about 17 PSI and it pulls pretty good. And like I said, because of the all-wheel drive, it pulls down the power pretty good. And it's got upgraded brakes front and rear. deleted the ABS, all the brake lines from the master cylinder to the calipers is all brand new. So the official dyno number on the car was right around 250 horsepower at all 4 wheels, but pretty much everyone who's ridden in the car doesn't believe that number. So I'm just gonna say I think it makes more than that, but you know, that's the official number. So I was gonna drive here by myself, trailer the car. You know, a week beforehand, I kind of almost jokingly, you know, asked my buddy Chance if he'd want to come along, and he was game, and his girlfriend Tiffany was too, which was super cool. And so, you know, all of a sudden I went from having 1 driver to having 3 drivers, which saved my bacon. Honestly, it made it a lot more feasible.
Was it worth it?
It was totally worth it. I was just so humbled by the reception of the car here, and then, you know, which was really, really rewarding after all the work and time that's gone into it. And then on top of that, just this place is just spectacular. And I had tried to shake the car down pretty well other places. You know, there's a lot of good roads in Southern California, but once you get here and you can drive for 5 hours and you're on the best roads, you're just ripping the car the whole time, then you really see what the car can do, and whether it's going to overheat or, you know, it can handle it, and the brakes and the suspension and everything else. And so this was, I think, the ultimate test of the car. You know, there's a lot of things I want to go fix now that I've driven it here, but essentially it survived it, so I'd call it a win. I've just upgraded the spring rates in the rear because of the extra weight in the back, and that helped a lot. But now the dampening doesn't feel quite right for the springs, so I think the next step is adjustable dampening, and then still want to make some adjustments in tuning and stuff for the engine. But I'd say the one thing I don't want to change at this point is the brakes. The brakes were really awesome, so that was that's an important thing to have work right. Yeah, I mean, in terms of cost of the project, I guess the honest answer is I haven't really kept that close a track on purpose. I'll just say this, it seemed for a while there like anytime I made any kind of purchase, it was at least $200 when I needed some sort of parts for something. Ultimately, you know, it is a big financial undertaking. You know, you definitely have to budget for it if you really want to do something like this. It's difficult to list everything that's done to the car because a lot of stuff has been touched. You know, the interior I tried to keep pretty original, but even then I found some Recaro LS's which get a lot of brownie points with the comfort, and they just look really cool. So even the interior's been, you know, massively modified. I can't forget the wheels. The wheels are, you know, something that everybody talks about. They're custom built BBS LMs. There's a lot of details that went into making the car what it is, for sure. I could not afford to respray the car when I finished it, so I decided to teach myself how to vinyl wrap the car, and I vinyl wrapped the car pretty cool blue color, just something different. I just had a big birthday recently, number 40, and so my dad decided to hook me up with a respray for my birthday. So we just got it back from paint like 4 weeks ago, and then I had to basically reassemble the car to try and get it ready for Wookies in time. So yeah, it's very, very fresh paint. Do your research in advance. You know, YouTube and Instagram are your best friends in terms of like doing your research, finding out what parts fit, what works, how other people have approached it. There are actually a lot of different ways you can build a car like this. There is not just one way. I'm not gonna necessarily say that my way was the right way either. I would get the hull decks in the car and kind of do some of the basic fabrication, and then, you know, at that point I would probably turn it over to a professional, especially for things like wiring and that kind of stuff. Just the more I worked on it, the more confidence I got, and I decided to just do everything myself, basically. So yeah, so the hull deck is controlled by an aftermarket controller. It's actually for sale through DAP's website. Vandevere Engineering is what it's called. It's controllable on my phone through Bluetooth, and then it also has a manual override switch, so I can basically program it to do it. The way I'm using it right now is based on throttle position. So when the throttle position is really low, like on the highway, it's just front wheel drive. And then when I get into throttle and corners and things like that, it engages the rear all the way up to 50-50. So that's how I'm controlling it. It was pretty plug and play, a little bit of wiring, but it was pretty straightforward, and it works really, really well. Yeah, if you want to see the details of the build, I'm sure nobody wants to watch a 1 hour video where I spell out every last little detail. So I'm just kind of trying to hit the high points, things that I think might be of interest. I tried to be really generous in posting tons and tons of pictures for two reasons, really. One was So if anyone else was crazy enough to take this on, they could see how I did it. And then the other very important reason was so that if someone saw me do something stupid, they would hopefully put some comments up and tell me what I did wrong. So it was very much for both reasons, and there's a lot of pictures on my page if you want to see how it was built. But I'll say this, I mean, I'm not a mechanic, and I'm not trained in this, professionally, and I took it on and just kind of had a will to make it work. And I think, honestly, if I can do it, anybody can. I mean, there's a lot of time spent on the internet researching things, a lot of time learning how to weld and do things like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, the biggest ingredient is patience and just, perseverance with it.